In the late 1990s, the global entertainment industry was completely transformed by an unprecedented wave of manufactured pop acts. Behind mega-selling groups like the Backstreet Boys stood a larger-than-life impresario who projected boundless wealth, cultural influence, and absolute industry dominance. Yet beneath this glittery facade of stadium tours and multi-platinum records lay a shadowy enterprise constructed entirely on systematic financial fabrications, concealing one of the longest-running white-collar frauds in American history. Lou Pearlman did not begin his business career in the recording booth. His early commercial ventures centered on aviation leasing, blimp operations, and charter transport services based out of Orlando, Florida. Pearlman understood early on that in corporate enterprise, the projection of massive physical assets often carries far more weight than audited reality. By cultivating an image of industrial grandeur, he laid the groundwork for an intricate network of shell companies designed to absorb millions in investor capital. At the absolute center of this corporate network was Trans Continental Airlines, an entity marketed to the public as a thriving commercial air charter fleet. Pearlman established an investment program promising steady, high-yield returns with minimal perceived risk. A Ponzi scheme is a fraudulent investment operation where returns to older investors are paid using capital contributed by newer investors rather than legitimate business profit. Pearlman utilized this precise financial mechanism to sustain an illusion of corporate health. The glittering success of his boy bands served as the ultimate psychological distraction for prospective investors. Looking at sold-out stadium crowds and platinum records, observers assumed that Pearlman's aviation enterprise was backed by genuine commercial triumphs. He skillfully leveraged this high-profile celebrity status to manufacture unshakable trust. If an entrepreneur could launch global pop sensations, investors reasoned, his commercial investment funds must be equally secure, insulated from broader economic volatility. The human impact of this illusion concentrated heavily on Florida retirees, small business owners, and trusting family friends. Drawn by promises of above-market interest rates and secure principal guarantees, hundreds of individuals transferred their entire life savings into Pearlman's commercial programs. Many depositors reinvested their earnings for decades, trusting polished paper statements that showed steady, uninterrupted compound growth, while their actual principal was quietly siphoned away into personal accounts. The scheme's extraordinary longevity relied on severe regulatory blind spots and highly sophisticated documentation forgery. Pearlman generated elaborate financial statements audited by an accounting firm that existed entirely on paper. Fake corporate officers, fictitious bank guarantees, and fabricated regulatory filings were routinely used to satisfy casual inquiry. Because investors received consistent paper returns, few questioned the underlying mechanics, allowing the fraudulent enterprise to operate unhindered across more than 2 decades. For over 20 years, the steady influx of fresh investor capital seamlessly masked the structural decay beneath Trans Continental. Payouts to veteran depositors were smoothly funded by fresh capital from new victims, maintaining a deceptive financial equilibrium that appeared completely immune to broader market volatility and shifting economic conditions. This continuous churn created a false sense of permanent security among long-term clients. As the early 2000s unfolded, significant cracks began to form in the carefully crafted narrative. Legal disputes between Pearlman and the pop groups he managed brought increasing scrutiny to his complex financial dealings. Performers claimed millions of dollars in earned royalties were missing, prompting legal teams to probe the true cash flows of his parent companies. However, proving systematic financial fraud required peering through dense layers of corporate shell entities designed specifically to obscure true ownership. To maintain the illusion of absolute solvency, Pearlman claimed his investment programs were backed by extensive federal insurance coverage and tangible commercial assets. In reality, these financial instruments lacked any authentic institutional underwriting. False comfort was generated by elaborate circular transactions, where capital moved continuously between controlled bank accounts to simulate legitimate commercial activity, leaving the core investment pool completely hollowed out beneath the surface. The broader financial ecosystem of that era inadvertently enabled this massive deception, During periods of low interest rates, individual investors actively sought reliable fixed-income returns, making Pearlman's high-yield corporate paper look exceptionally attractive. The systemic lack of cross-agency verification allowed a non-existent airline to collect hundreds of millions of dollars without triggering immediate red flags among primary state or federal regulatory bodies. The unraveling began not in a formal regulatory hearing, but through a single targeted inquiry initiated by a deeply skeptical investor. Unwilling to rely solely on glossy paper prospectuses and reassuring corporate literature, the investor hired an independent specialist to thoroughly scrutinize the underlying corporate structure. Forensic accounting is the detailed, investigative analysis of financial records to uncover discrepancies, trace assets, and gather legal evidence of systematic fraud. The investigator approached the enterprise not as a passive observer, but as a rigorous auditor demanding physical verification of claimed physical assets. Rather than accepting forged bank statements at face value, the analyst cross-referenced reported serial numbers, FAA corporate registries, and physical facility leases. This empirical methodology shifted the investigation from merely reviewing polished balance sheets to seeking undeniable physical evidence of actual commercial air operations. The critical breakthrough occurred at an airport hangar, where Trans Continental Airlines allegedly housed its commercial charter fleet. Upon physically visiting the location, investigators discovered an empty structure containing 0 operational aircraft. The sprawling fleet presented in promotional brochures was completely non-existent. A single physical verification had pierced a 2-decade-long financial illusion, confirming that the corporate giant was merely a hollow paper tiger. This startling discovery exposed the extreme fragility of complex financial facades. Once a single core claim, the existence of a physical aircraft fleet, was disproven, the surrounding regulatory and accounting defense structures collapsed almost instantly. The systemic failure of financial oversight bodies to verify physical collateral had allowed hundreds of millions of dollars in fictional values to persist unchecked for more than 20 years. Florida state financial regulators and federal law enforcement agencies moved swiftly once the physical reality was established. In late 2006, state officials issued emergency cease and desist orders against Pearlman and his affiliated entities, effectively freezing operations. Bank accounts were seized, revealing that hundreds of millions of dollars promised to investors had vanished into bad debts, personal extravagance, and payments to sustain the ongoing deception. The sudden corporate collapse shattered thousands of households that had relied on the program for their long-term retirement security. Over $500 million in lifetime savings were wiped out virtually overnight. Victims faced the devastating realization that their quarterly account statements were entirely meaningless, leaving community organizations, retirees, and local businesses facing total financial ruin without any immediate path toward recovering their capital. As federal indictments were unsealed, Pearlman fled the United States, sparking a high-stakes international law enforcement manhunt. He moved through multiple foreign countries under false identities, attempting to evade justice while his corporate empire dissolved under court-ordered receivership. In 2007, international law enforcement authorities finally apprehended Pearlman in Indonesia, extraditing him back to the United States to face multiple counts of federal criminal charges in a Florida courtroom. Pearlman ultimately pled guilty to charges of bank fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering conspiracy, receiving a 20-year sentence in federal prison. Court proceedings systematically dismantled his remaining asset holdings, though court-appointed receivers recovered only a tiny fraction of the total lost capital. The legal resolution formally confirmed that the pop music titan had operated a massive fraud scheme exceeding $500 million. The downfall of Trans Continental offered a stark case study in the dynamics of celebrity-linked affinity fraud. Affinity fraud occurs when fraudsters exploit a victim's trust based on shared group identity, common interests, or public celebrity association. Pearlman's high-visibility success in the music industry acted as a powerful psychological shield, blunting the natural skepticism investors normally apply to complex financial instruments and corporate guarantees. Preventing similar financial catastrophes requires establishing rigid personal due diligence protocols that bypass corporate prestige and celebrity endorsement. Financial experts emphasize that no level of public fame, professional status, or historical stability eliminates the necessity of independent regulatory verification. True financial protection rests on confirming that investment custodians and asset managers are fully registered with primary regulatory authorities before any capital is ever committed. The case underscores how human psychology can be systematically manipulated when visible prestige masks underlying structural risk. Investors naturally assign unearned credibility to high-profile figures, assuming that public success guarantees internal corporate integrity. Recognizing this cognitive bias is essential for evaluating financial claims objectively, ensuring that visible luxury and public acclaim are never mistaken for genuine balance sheet solvency or financial health. Ultimately, the exposure of Pearlman's massive scheme demonstrated that even the most elaborate corporate illusions inevitably fall to simple, empirical verification. By demanding clear operational transparency, verifying tangible physical assets, and maintaining healthy skepticism toward guaranteed returns, individuals and institutions alike can protect their life savings from sophisticated financial deception, ensuring that their investment decisions remain firmly anchored in verified reality. New Stories Weekly. Stay one step ahead of the fraud. Subscribe.